Mamma mia, it's perfect. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to a very special episode of Yami Noob. Today we are doing my 1 year long-term review of my much beloved Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled, and we've brought it out to an honest-to-God desert. We're here in Big Bend National Park. Well, near Big Bend. The park is actually closed due to the pandemic that's happening, but we're making do. We're on this cool back road over here, just having fun with the sled. And today I'm gonna tell you all about this motorcycle, my 1 year of ownership with it, why I got it, and this is honestly just a love letter to this bike, so let's do it. So what is this motorcycle? So this is Ducati's Scrambler platform. It features that same lovable 803cc air-cooled 2-valve Ducati L-twin engine. But what they've done for the Desert Sled is modified a couple things. They put big beefy front forks on it, long travel suspension, raised the whole thing up. The frame is different. They put wire framed wheels on it. It's got knobbies, it's got a bigger front tire. Basically, it's just a Scrambler that's designed to do a little bit more off-roady stuff. And honestly, when you look at the specs of this thing, which I've done a comprehensive review on it, you can click down below and check that out. This thing's actually pretty capable. It features a pretty tall ground clearance. It's got good travel on suspension. It's got an off-road mode on it, and it actually has the throttle mapped in for the off-road mode, so it actually feels a little bit nicer off-road, not as snatchy as something else you might ride. So it's a pretty awesome motorcycle. Okay, so why did I even buy this thing in the first place? Honestly, I went to the dealership, I've been looking at these bikes, I lusted after them, and I just fell in love with it as soon as I saw it, and I had to get it. Honestly, that's literally the only reason I got this thing. And it was honestly my first foray into anything more adventure-y or more off-roady, that kind of thing, and I really cut my teeth with this motorcycle and started to understand how to slide it around, play with it off-road. And as many of you have seen a couple of my vlogs where I took it, you know, on trails and stuff like that, it was definitely a trial by fire because this thing is definitely a little bit big to be doing the things I was doing with it, but I figured it's a desert sled, it's an off-road bike, so I'm just gonna do it. So that's why I got it. So in the time that I've owned this thing, I've put on 6,859 miles on it. So I'm coming right up on that 7,500 mile service, put on a good bit of mileage on this bike. And all I've done with it is trails in Austin, goofing around in the city, treating it like some kind of big super mega moto thing. I've taken it on a big trip in Mexico. I took it down some trails down there. I pop wheelies with this thing all the time, slide it around town. It's just such a playful and lovable motorcycle to ride. Every time I get on it, I just fall more and more in love with it, and I think that's why I'm so excited to talk about this long-term review, because I'm actually more head over heels for this motorcycle than when I first bought it, because I understand it more and I've gotten more experience with it. It's a fantastic riding experience. And as a quick note, even though I did learn how to ride off-road with this thing, I actually just picked up a new KTM 250 SXF to learn more extreme kind of enduro and trail-oriented things, and it's a lot easier to ride a 230-pound motorcycle than it is a 440-pound motorcycle. But this thing is still tons of fun with what we're doing with it today, which are these big, fast, flowy kind of gravel roads. Okay, I've been pretty effusive about this motorcycle so far, but let me tell you some things I don't like about it. Number one, it runs super hot. No matter how you slice it, this air-cooled engine from Ducati, it just runs really, really hot. I live in Texas, and normally, you know, from like, I'd say May all the way till September of the year, you see almost triple-digit numbers for the temps. And so this motorcycle does not love super hot weather. So if you live somewhere more temperate, this will be a good option for you. If you live somewhere like I do in Texas, be prepared to suffer a little bit. It does get quite hot. The other con about it is maintenance. This motorcycle, unfortunately, it is a Ducati. You do pay that Ducati tax on it. So every time I've brought it to the dealership, had to do anything to it, had to fix anything on it, had to change anything on it, it does end up costing me about 30 to 40% more than I'm used to spending on a normal motorcycle from the Big Four. Another con, in my opinion, is this bike's weight. I mentioned that for an adventure bike, it's actually pretty lightweight. If you look at something like the big GS's or the Tiger 900s, not the new one, but maybe the old Tiger 800s and the 1200s, this motorcycle actually is pretty light in that category, but compared to dirt bikes, this thing is super heavy. So this thing weighs about 440 pounds, soaking wet, ready to ride, and that makes it just a little bit more cumbersome if you do take it on something more extreme and you do end up dropping it. It's gonna be really hard to pick up. I hope you have a buddy there with you, because if you drop this thing 2 or 3 times on a ride, you're probably gonna be absolutely cooked by the end of the day. So that to me is a bit of a con of how this bike weighs. In my opinion, Ducati should have figured out out a way to lighten this thing up and get it to about 375 to 360 pounds, I think that would have been absolutely perfect for the type of bike this is. But I think with this big lump of an air-cooled engine, there was just no way to make it any lighter, really. So maybe in some alternate dimension, Ducati actually went back and put a single cylinder in this motorcycle and made a proper desert sled that goes back to their heritage. But who can say? I don't live in that alternate dimension. I have to deal with this 440-pound motorcycle. So I actually have not had any major issues in the 1 year that I've owned this motorcycle. The only couple of things that have come up have actually been because I've crashed it off-road. So I've had an issue with the rear brake fluid having come off a little bit. So over time, it's just draining some rear brake fluid. I'm pretty sure I just need to fix that somehow. There's probably a leak somewhere in the line. It's really no big deal. I just top it up with brake fluid every like 2 months and it's fine. I know that's not normal, but I gotta look at that and sort it out. And honestly, that's about it. The only other weird thing about this motorcycle is when you first start it up, the clutch and throttle, they interact in a very peculiar way. They don't interact like it does when it's warmed up. Basically, this bike does not like riding when it's cold. You have to let it warm up, you have to let it do its thing a little bit, and then it works well. For example, when it's cold, it will not go into neutral unless you slightly hold the revs at 2,000 RPMs, then it lets go and puts it into neutral. I don't know why it does that, but it just does. And so yeah, it's just like a couple little things here and there you got to remember about Ducati ownership. And actually a couple Ducati guys that I know have told me that that neutral problem is pretty common. The gearbox is not super great on this thing. I do wish it was more like a Triumph gearbox and it was actually a little bit more snickety, but it's a little bit more loose and kind of floppy. But really that's the only issues I've had with it. So let's talk about some pros to this motorcycle as well. So as I mentioned, this motorcycle comes with an off-road mode, which lightens up the throttle a little bit. It makes it a little bit more easygoing off-road. And to me, that's one of the best parts about this bike. The throttle feel is absolutely sublime. Mamma mia, it's perfect. I love the throttle on this bike so much. I could wax poetic about it. I ride it around town, ride it on trails, ride it anywhere. It's just so nice and well fueled. It's very, very good. But it's also very good because it's mated to that engine. Even though it is hot, even though it is a bit of a lump, this 803cc from Ducati is really good. I think it's one of the best street-oriented engines because it makes about 75 horsepower, about 50 foot-pounds of torque. That is just the perfect amount of power for a street/off-road kind of scrambly bike like this for me. It's tons of fun. I feel like I can use 100% of it all the time. It rips wheelies. It's super great. The suspension's a really bright spot for me on this motorcycle as well. With these big 46mm forks that are fully adjustable, I was able to take this to my guy in Austin and get this dialed in for my weight, and it just feels awesome. So over the regular Scrambler, it's a big upgrade for these forks. So another thing I want to mention as well on this motorcycle is you might notice that I have some very fresh Pirelli Rally Scorpion STRs on this thing. And that is because I dabbled a little bit with another more aggressive off-road tire for this motorcycle. I'll include a picture right here so you can see it. It was the Moto Z Tractionator Adventure tire, which is listed as a 20/80 tire, which means it's 20% on-road, 80% off-road. I had a lot of fun with that tire whenever I was doing my Mexico trip and when I was like goofing around more on trails. It works super, super well. It just hooks up. It's really great. It's got these big blocks on it. But for the type of riding I do and taking a more realistic approach and what I actually do with this motorcycle, I actually found these Pirellis that came stock with it really good. So actually when my Moto Zs burnt up to a crisp, I went back and put on the OEM equipment tire, which is not something that I normally would do, but I think this tire works super well with this motorcycle. This is actually the OEM equipment for the Tenere 700 actually. It comes with these Rally Scorpions. And this is a really good tire. It's got these big fat blocks on it. Is it super aggressive off-road? Not really, but you gotta remember it's fitting the bike that it's on. So for me, I think this provides really good on-road performance for what it is and respectable off-road performance and a decent amount of tire life. So I feel like on those metrics, it does tend to work pretty well. So I've kept this motorcycle basically stock in the year that I've owned it. The only couple of things I've done was I've added these Evotech sort of bark busters here. They're not exactly bark busters, just lever guards basically, because the first tip over I had already smashed over a lever, so I was like, gotta get some bark busters on there. I've put some case protectors on it right here, making sure that we don't get any holes in the cases. And as everyone sees over here, I've got the Aero exhaust. It's all beat up from all my crashes, and I've got a Rapid Bike tuner in there as well to make sure that it's all nice and fueled correctly. Gives it a nice bark. It sounds really, really good. And that's basically all I've done to it. A couple other things I've done is I removed the rubber foot pegs right here and the pegs right there. I've taken off the passenger pegs. I've adjusted the rear brake angle so that when I'm riding off-road and I'm standing, I can actually get a good amount of rear brake on there and use it as needed. Adjusted the controls a little bit, but honestly, that's kind of it. I've run this bike basically stock. I've not changed a whole lot on it. And honestly, my favorite thing about it, it just looks fucking cool, you know? Look at this thing. Who wouldn't want to own this? It looks awesome. I literally fell in love with this thing as soon as I saw it. I think it just looks really cool. And as much as we don't want to admit it, bikers are a bit of some vain creatures. We do like bikes that, you know, speak to us, that look cool, that you want that look back effect, you know, and I definitely have this with this motorcycle. So wrapping this up here today, is this bike for everybody? No, certainly not. If you want a hardcore dirt bike, this is the wrong bike. If you want a big adventure, comfortable touring bike, this is the wrong bike. If you want an honest, simple motorcycle that can do some pretty cool off-road stuff if you're willing to push it and have some fun with it, this thing's awesome. I feel like it doesn't really have any competition in that way, except for something maybe like the Tenere 700, which is more bare bones and simple. Here's the problem though. Tenere 700 costs $10,000. This is like 13 grand for less features and not as capable. So take that for what you will. Maybe I'm stupid for buying it. I don't care. I love this thing. So my sweet little squid, this video is actually over, but lucky for you, click on this one right here. You can keep watching your sweet Papa Yam, delivering you the motorcycle content you've come to know and love. Don't worry, I'll wait. I'll be here waiting for you. You're gonna click on that video.